I invite you to come with me to the book of Genesis, chapter 32. This time around, we read verses 30 and 31. This is how the New Living Translation reports this very interesting occurrence. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. 31. The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Amen. Asithandaze. Babelo hlala ezulwini, siyabonga livi lakho selifunziwe. Sisesikhatsini la khona tinhlitiyo tethu tiyaminta. Timinta elidzakeni lekwesaba, ngobe phela nasi nesikhathi se-lockdown seseluliwe. Siyakhumbula ukuthi nakwenteka tinto letinje, umnotho welive uyalimala. Nakulimala umnotho welive, tisebenti titawulahlekelwa umsebenzi, bese nabasebenzi balahlekelwe umsebenzi, bese kwanza budlwangudlwangu nebugebengu nobugcwelegcwele eveni. Na sekwenteke njalo, nebaholi belive bayehluleka kulawula bahlali, bese nakwenteke njalo nemthetho bese sawuba sesigabeni lapho ungasakwadi ukuthi ukwadi ku-implementeka. Siyanxusa-ke Jesu ukuthi lenteke livi lakho lisikhumbude tinto letitsite lowatenta kubantwana bakho endulo. Ingane nananguya umprofeti Elijah abhacile laphayi kwafika emagwababa amondla. Nathi-ke sikule nzawo nesikhathi lesikiso utawusithumelela emagwababa lesikhathi akwati kondla bantwana bakho. Singete sabulawa indlala ukhona, lenteke livi lakho nembala libe ngumbhoshongo wekubalekela, ngoba bayabhaca labagijimela kiwo. Siyathandaza ukuthi lente livi lakho libe ngemadvodza lasiqinisako, ngoba nembala nasesilifunzile livi lakho salikholwa utawusisita ukuthi sengce kulesikhathi lesibhekene naso. NgaJesu siyakhuleka. Amen. Before I could share with you the spiritual principles emanating from the two verses we have just read, allow me to revisit with you the preceding event where Jacob comes to this particular stream with a heart burdened by an issue which had happened to him over 2 decades ago. The accumulation of things while he was living with Laban had failed to alleviate his troubled heart of this particular issue. The largeness of his animal stock, the largeness of his family, all these had failed to alleviate his troubled heart of this particular issue. He then arrives at this stream, and then when he gets to this stream, he senses a need, he senses an urge to take this issue to God so that he may allow God to pave a way in which the differences that he had with his brother could be settled. At last, we do observe that Jacob had succumbed to the reality that challenges which were spiritual in nature require spiritual solutions. He then begins to prepare himself to seek God's intervention in prayer. But he does realize that with the presence of things around him, he would not be in a position to speak to God freely. His intention would be compromised. He then deliberately sends away his livestock. He then deliberately sends away his family so that he may remain alone with God in prayer. Not only did he send away his livestock and family, he also gave away his human pride. You see, the stream where he had arrived at is a stream which had not been known by the name Jabbok. For the stream only derived its name after the Jacob's experience. Therefore, when Jacob came to this place, if we were to feed into this name, for the name Jabbok carries these three nuances. One, it has a nuance of nothingness, a nuance of emptiness, a nuance of dust, which therefore means when Jacob arrived at this place, he came to a realization that he could not come to God but still full of himself. He could not come to God while he was full of things. He then saw it fit to hand over the whole situation entirely to God, so that God may be the one that would fill his emptiness, so that God may be the one that would make him somebody, so that God may be the one that changes his dust status. So for that reason, we do realize that when we come to our Jabbok experience, when we come to a Jabbok, we need to realize that Jabbok should be a place of self-introspection. When we come to Jabbok, Jabbok should be a place of submission. When we come to Jabbok, it should be a place of confession, a place of confronting self, a place of seeking God's will. Once we assume such a mentality, once we assume such a mindset, definitely heaven will not delay. Heaven will not wait any longer, but heaven will swiftly come down to our rescue. Heaven will swiftly come down with a solution. Therefore, we now see in the 3 verses we have read 3 things that transpired when Jacob was in the season of prayer, when Jacob was confronting with God, when Jacob had this encounter with heaven. Number 1, when Jacob came out of the prayer session, he came out with a name change. When he came out of the prayer session, number 2, he came out with a view of God changed. Number 3, when he came out of this prayer session, he came out with his walk changed. So it is not possible for us to get to the presence of God and still come out of that presence unchanged. When Jacob left that place, no longer would he be called Jacob, for the name Jacob simply means birthright grabber. The name Jacob simply means a manipulator. When he left that place, he was Israel, for the name Israel means a prince who rules with God. We can't go through this lockdown after praying so hard but still come out the same in the end. We cannot be the same people harboring grudges. We cannot be the same people who are revengeful. We cannot be the same people who are unforgiving. We cannot be the same people who are proud. We cannot be the same people who are self-conceited. We cannot be the same people who are hostile and selfish. When we come out of a prayer session, we should be a people that come out with an attitude that transmits love, an attitude that transmits joy, an attitude that transmits patience, an attitude that transmits goodness, an attitude that transmits gentleness, an attitude that transmits tenderness, an attitude that transmits self-control. When Jacob came out of the presence of God, we see that he came out with a different view of God. Previous to this experience, he had thought God only as a God that was transcendent. But after this experience, he discovered that God was not only transcendent, but he was also immanent. When he came out of this experience, he discovered that God was not only high and exalted, but he was also close to his creatures, close enough to be touched. When he came out of this experience, he came out with an understanding, a view that God was not only spirit, but God was also physical. When he came out of this experience, he came out knowing that God was not only strict, but he was a God that was full of grace. He came out of this experience understanding that God was not only the one who abhors sin, but he still was a God who was a friend of sinners. When he came out of this experience, he had thought God was immortal, but he now understood that God was not only immortal, but was a God who hides his immortality in the flesh. He understood that God was not only powerful, but he was also a God that could assume a human body, to assume human weaknesses, so that he could be in a position to reach out to them. When he came out of that night with God, when he came out of that prayer session, when he came out of that encounter with God, he comes and reports to us that he had seen the faces of God. For the name Peniel means the faces of God. God is transcendent, but he is also immanent. God is high and exalted, but is also close to his creation. God is spirit, but is also can be physical. God is strict, but can also be full of grace. God abhors sin, but is a friend of sinners. God is immortal, but hides his immortality in the flesh. God is powerful, but he also assumes human weaknesses so that he may reach out to them. Thank God that when he came out with this view of God. We remember, brothers and sisters, that it is impossible to come to the presence of God and come out the same. Moses, when he met God in the mountain, when he returned with a face that was glowing in the glory and with the glory of God. We remember Paul, when Paul had an encounter with God on his way to Damascus. The Bible tells us, brothers and sisters, that Paul came out of that experience a changed man. The Bible tells us, brothers and sisters, that when the disciples met at the upper room, when they came out of that upper room, no longer were they timid, but they went out courageous. They went out full of hope. They went out and confronted the world as evangelists. We have the gospel of Jesus through those timid disciples who were changed by moments of prayer in the upper room. We see in the verses that we've read another interesting development, that when Jacob came out of the prayer session with God, he came out with a limping walk. I dare say to us, when we come out of that experience with God, we need to expect to lose something, because an encounter with God forces us to lose something. We are going to lose septic friends. We are going to lose some kind of business, the business that comes as a result of us being involved in some kind of shady deals. The Bible does say that we cannot gain heaven and gain the world at the same time. What shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul? Brothers and sisters, I dare say that as we work this As we walk this planet as God's children, we need to walk it as changed people. Paul was a changed person. He then says to us in the book of Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, yes, we are after all jars of clay, but thank God we contain treasure which will never diminish or lose its value. He says in verse 8, we are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We are knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Though we suffer, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus Christ, so that the life of Jesus may be seen in our bodies. Brothers and sisters, this challenge we are faced with is certainly going to change us, but thank God that our scars will be changed to stars. May the Lord bless us. Amen.